All right, I think we are live and have a connection here, and our participants are joining us. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 Annual General Meeting of College of Occupational Therapists of Board of Directors, and it's a privilege to represent the board of the college at its 21st Annual General Meeting. And I now call the AGM to order. To start us off today, I'll just wait for the next slide to show up here for us. There we go. Thank you. So to start us off today, I would like to take a moment to share a land acknowledgement. COTBC views land acknowledgements as one way to recognize and respect the relationships of Indigenous peoples to their lands, while enhancing the understanding for the need of decolonization. They are a way to celebrate, honor, and pay respect to the special relationship to the land which has existed since time immemorial and continues to exist today. We believe the elements of respect, honor, and truth contribute to enhanced relationships and reconciliation. So with this, I would like to acknowledge with deep respect that the COTBC office is located on the traditional territory of the Wasatch peoples, including the Paquachin, Sayut, Sartlip land since time immemorial. We acknowledge our hosts and thank them for allowing us to carry out this work on the land. As we gather virtually here today, we ask that you take the time to reflect meaningfully on the traditional and territory or unceded territory from which you are joining us. As COTBC regulates the practice of occupational therapy across the entire territory, which is now known as British Columbia, the college also recognizes all First Nations, Métis chartered communities, and the Inuit living across this land. We are privileged to be located here where we work, live, and play. Before we move on, I would like to take a few moments to talk about the image on your screen, and it is actually quite a powerful image. This picture was taken at an important ceremony in July at Spanish Banks on the unceded and ancestral traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I would like to draw your attention to the two individuals on the image. The individual speaking on the right is Joe Gallagher, or Cunningham, of the Sliman Nation. Joining him on his right, or on our left, is Salksun, or Shane Point, the knowledge carrier, Salish Nation. I will have the opportunity to tell you more about their important roles and this ceremony a bit later in the slides. So before we get started, I just have a few technical tips to share with you. So if you do encounter any technical difficulties, please click on the chat button on your screen to communicate with our technical support team. You should be hearing audio through your throughout the meeting. The online AGM gives us little opportunity for question and answer during the meeting. For this reason, the question and answer session is structured to answer questions that were submitted to us prior to the meeting. In order to respect people's time, we have allotted up to 1 hour for the duration of the AGM. If there are additional questions or concerns that arise throughout the meeting, the board and staff will consider calling an additional general meeting at a later date. The board values interaction with registrants, and the input that you provide is important and will be fully considered by the board and the staff. Questions for the college may be submitted using the question and answer function, not the chat function, and they will be reviewed following the meeting. So now we have an overview of our agenda. So in thinking about the number of participants required for quorum, I'm looking at the participation box and I see that you have surpassed our expectations. So I declare that we do have quorum and that we shall proceed with the business of the meeting. Please note that the meeting is being recorded. Following the AGM, the college will upload the video and proceedings on the website. Our agenda includes a number of things. Firstly, I would like to welcome guests, the board, and the staff. We will proceed to the items listed in the agenda for the meeting, including the report from the chair, and Kathy Corbett, registrar, will present the audited financial statements. Once those are concluded, we will proceed to the question and answer session and make other announcements prior to adjourning the meeting. I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking the board, committee members, and COTBC staff for joining the session today. A little later in my report, you will see a picture of the board members as well as a listing of all of our dedicated committee members. I would like to introduce you to those joining me in presenting today. First, let me introduce my fellow board members. Mary O'Callaghan, a member of the public. Gail Nye, a member of the public. Jennifer Glasgow, an elected OT registrant. Also joining us is COTBC's registrar, Kathy Corbett, Deputy Registrar, Andrea Bowden, and Manager, Quality Assurance Program, Heather Barrett. Thank you all for joining me today. So before I share my chair's report, let's do a quick poll and see who is joining us today. So the first question that we have is, what region best describes where you are joining us from today? So if you can just take a minute and participate on the poll on your screen, and we'll give everybody a little bit of time to put in your responses. Okay, so we have the poll results in. Oh, and I just lost the clip right in front of me with those results. There we go. Thanks on the other side. So good representation through the province. So Metro Vancouver, Vancouver Island, pretty close with the Okanagan, Fraser. So thank you everybody for joining us from across the province. One of the things that we are evaluating is the virtual component. So second question I think we have. There we go. Thank you. How many times have you participated in a COTBC AGM prior today? So again, we'll just give everybody a bit of time for your selection there. Okay, so, a fair amount. This is your first AGM. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Greatly appreciate your participation in today. And then we have a mix across the board from other participants, over 10 times, 27%. Great, thank you. And I believe this is one more question and our last question. This is our second virtual AGM. Did hosting this session online increase your interest or ability to attend today? Okay, well, thank you. So we're seeing a large percentage, 83%. It did make a difference for your participation today. So thank you very much, everyone, for giving us your feedback. We will be using that to help inform us for future planning in future AGMs. So thank you. And again, thank you for joining us in today's session. So it is my pleasure to provide the report from the board. While the 2021 annual report details a variety of the college activities, today I'm going to be drawing your attention to a few of the key highlights. To learn more, I do encourage you to take a look through the electronic copy of the report, which is available on the COTBC website. As mentioned, my name is Karen Plischke. I am the board chair and I have been a board member since 2015. I am very proud to be a member of the board, and I take this opportunity to thank the board members who contribute their time, skills, and energy to the important work of the college to protect the public. Also, personally, I would like to thank you, my fellow board members, for trusting in me and supporting me in my role as chair of the board this past year. It has been a sincere pleasure serving with you this past year. Thank you. Our commitment to Indigenous cultural safety and humility is a strategic priority for the college. Events of this past year have compelled the college to step up its efforts. In November 2020, the Ministry of Health released the report In Plain Sight, addressing Indigenous-specific racism and discrimination in BC healthcare, providing evidence of continued widespread stereotypes, discrimination, racism, and abuse experienced by Indigenous peoples accessing and receiving healthcare services. The report illustrates how the current healthcare system continues to limit safe access to healthcare and negatively affects the health and wellness of Indigenous peoples. As such, the board also stepped up our efforts. We engaged in a workshop to increase our awareness and understanding of board leadership on the issue of Indigenous-specific racism. Joe Gallagher and Shane Point, who we saw in the earlier image, led us through a board session of learning and challenged us in our unconscious bias through sharing, art, and reflection. The session underscored that this work is about being your personal best, addressing the issue at a personal level and through the responsibilities and leadership of the regulatory college. In response to one of the 24 recommendations in the Plain Sight report, COTBC, along with 10 other colleges, jointly issued an apology to Indigenous peoples, communities, registrants of the respective colleges who have experienced and suffered from racism while engaging with our organizations or with the health professionals that we regulate. I encourage you to visit our website where there is a link to a short video of the pledge and a very special signing ceremony held at Spanish Banks on July 27th. I really do encourage you to take a look at the video. It is quite moving and powerful. The college's pledge to take concrete actions and support a speak up culture, that the rights of Indigenous peoples will be upheld and racism eliminated from the healthcare system. We acknowledge that we have a lot to learn and that it may not be always comfortable or easy. We are committed to being guided by Indigenous elders and knowledge carriers. We are guided by the principles of respect, dignity, and equitable healthcare for Indigenous peoples. In addition, dedicated resources have been provided to continue with the focused action on integrating the principles of cultural safety and humility into college activities in a deliberate way. Our annual report provides progression on the activities of the team led by COTBC staff Andrea Bowden and Janetta Ozard. Thank you very much to both of you for this continued work. I would like to look at the image on the screen. If you look closely on the left of the image, you will see one of our board members, Jeff Boniface, in the black suit. On his left is Heather Barrett, manager of the Quality Assurance Program. And in the center of the image, facing the photograph, is Shane Point, our Sulkin, knowledge carrier who guided the session. To his left is Joe Gallagher, or Kuhneman, who you can see opening the ceremony with a land acknowledgement and welcome. At the very right of the picture, you can see the back of our registrar, Kathy Corbett's head, the black sweater on there and long brown hair. And just out of the picture on the right is Andrea Bowden, Deputy Registrar, who, as part of the important cultural protocol, acted as one of the 5 witnesses for the ceremony. Again, I encourage you to look at the link on the website to see the full impact and meaningful actions of this ceremony. And thank you to all of our board members and staff for your participation. The college continues to collaborate on regulatory work with other BC health profession colleges. COTBC partnered with 7 BC health profession regulators to evaluate the college's complaint process. Conducted by an independent research firm, the study received valuable feedback from complainants, registrants, inspectors, and committee members, which informed recommendations for improvement. We partnered with the College of Physical Therapists of British Columbia for a joint workshop for staff titled Call It Out: Racism, Racial Discrimination, and Human Rights. The workshop led staff through discussions about racism and discriminations and approaches to preventing and addressing racial discrimination. COTBC and CPTBC collaborated again to support a 2-part equity-focused leadership training for BC health regulator registrars. The session, Showing Up for Anti-Racism and Inclusion, provided the registrars with the opportunity to reflect on the concepts of identity, power, privilege, and racism within the workplace and our regulatory frameworks. As I present this report, it's humbling to consider that the continuing impact of COVID-19 in our communities, clients, registrants, and your personal networks. The public health emergency posed by COVID-19 has changed the way we live and work for almost 20 months now. Some of the changes have been welcomed and necessary, such as increased access to health services through virtual care and learning how to work remotely. However, both the short-term and long-term impacts of some of these and other changes will take more time and reflection to fully understand. The college has sustained its focus on protecting the public and supporting safe practice. Working with our partner Health BC regulators, the college ensured that registrants were informed about public health and regulatory measures required to prevent virus transmission and keep British Columbia safe when seeking occupational therapy services. The college practice advisory team created resources on telehealth guidance, managed a high volume of practice consultants, and maintained a dedicated COVID-19 information webpage to support safe practice during the pandemic. Staff provided a number of presentations and published new case studies on our website for registrants to test their understanding of practice standards, guide discussions with colleagues, and reflect on their own practice. While the Ministry of Health initiative has been underway well since before the pandemic, the final recommendations on how to modernize provincial health profession regulation was released in August 2020. One of the recommendations would see COTBC amalgamated into a multi-profession regulated, a college of allied health care professions. To date, there is no new news to report from the ministry on final approvals and implementation of recommendations. The proposed changes will likely require amendments to the Health Professions Act, and we will watch for those to be introduced. In the meantime, COTBC will continue our activities and partner health regulators and leverage our collective experience and expertise to be ready for the challenges that lie ahead. The work of the college is dependent on the dedication of those who participate on the COTBC board and its committees. Their name and talents in assisting us to achieve our mission in protecting the public are very much appreciated. We want to recognize those who have completed their terms in this past year. Thank you for your continued dedication. Many of these volunteers serve several terms and sometimes on different committees, demonstrating their commitment to regulation in the public interest. Your hard work and dedication to the work of COTBC and protecting the public has not gone unnoticed. On behalf of myself and the board, thank you, Kathy Corbett, and the college staff for your continued work and dedication to public safety. Your hard work and dedication also has not gone unnoticed, and thank you for all that you continue to do. I am now going to hand over the presentation to Kathy for the audited financial statements. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. So it's my pleasure. Thank you, Karen. And it's my pleasure to provide a summary of the audited financial statements for 2020 to 2021. You'll find them all completely published in the annual report in full, which is what we do every year. So they're always there. For this presentation, I'll be providing some highlights on the revenue and expenditures. Overall, the college continues to have a very strong financial position. And as for all health profession regulators, college revenue is derived primarily from registration fees. That won't come as a surprise to most of you on the line. Our revenue was decreased last year compared to the year before, based on the board's decision to provide some fee relief, reducing the fee by $100 and extending the renewal deadline. Of course, this was really because of the COVID pandemic that was declared. Our renewal period and expectations were shortly after that pandemic announcement in March, and the impact and restrictions on practice were implemented. So we gave an extended deadline, and we were acutely aware of the impact being felt. So that's why you'll see the revenue down. To accommodate the reduction, the board had approved use of our reserved funds if we needed to ensure all of our budgeted activities were happening and the revenue shortfall would be met that way. We're happy to report that the reserve funds weren't needed, really for lots of different reasons. Some primarily related, some related to the COVID pandemic, because many of our activities couldn't be done the way they usually were done. Meetings, travel, and some of our projects were actually postponed. So some of those things really impacted our work. Interestingly enough, our application fees were up through the year, which meant that people were continuing to get registered. So we were thankful people were getting back to practice. When we look at just sort of some snapshots of operations expenses, again, they're all detailed in the annual report financial statements. It's sort of helpful to take a look. Really, our operations are fairly consistent over the years, with minor variations where there are particular projects that take place. Legal costs are often primarily related to, along with general counsel to the college, but specifically more for inquiry. So when we have more complaints, there's more legal costs and those kinds of things, but they're fairly stable. You'll see in system development, there was quite a difference last year to this year, and that decrease was really because we implemented an entire upgrade to our Alinity registration system, and the other areas remain fairly stable. Oops, I'll turn my paper back. So what we try to do is provide a little bit of a snapshot. We're a fairly small college in the sense that we have some overlapping functions, but we try to take a look at where are the resources going. This gives you a bit of a snapshot of where some of the costs are really are spread out in terms of what our annual activities look like, and that just gives you a picture of the sort of proportional costs that go into our work as regulators. I think sometime that's helpful to look, and I have been asked from time to time, actually each year, around the inquiry costs. And again, they vary because they're dependent on the number of complaints that come in each year, but also complaints don't neatly fit within a registration cycle. So sometimes the costs vary because a complaint might carry over a registration cycle, and of course or a fiscal cycle. And so our costs are there, but it gives you a bit of a picture of where the costs go. Legal are certainly a big part of our costs for the college, related to the managing and ensuring that we are following reasonable and fair processes that are administratively robust from a legal perspective. Certainly inspectors, we regularly use college investigators to help us with the investigations. The inquiry committee, they assist the inquiry committee in gathering the information required for them to make a reasonable decision, a fair decision. Investigation tariffs are relate to actually recovery of costs. So there are provisions that where the inquiry committee has made a decision that practice wasn't to the standards expected related to the allegations in a complaint, we can recover some of the costs of that investigation. And lastly, just looking, we try to monitor the average investigation cost just to give us a picture of whether we're budgeting well and also kind of getting a sense of what those investigations take. So that just gives you a bit of a snapshot of an area of our work in the college that people often ask about. In terms of our statement of financial position, I think, it's again, we're fairly consistent over the years, but to help you understand this slide, starting with accounts payable, that really just means that where an invoice is received after our fiscal year, and so something can come in after the end of June, we obviously still have that liability because it was work and expenses that were incurred during that year. So we like to keep that low, but certainly it means that that expense properly belongs in the previous year. You can see from our unrestricted and our restricted funds that we have a very solid financial position in terms of money in the bank, if you will. Investments this year, we did see an impact of COVID on our investments, and interest rates fell for some of the GICs and some of the other investments that help us protect that principal for contingencies and the expectations that we'll be using those funds. The college's option this time, though, we did, without taking considerable risk, placed our funds into a dual investment account because the interest rates were actually higher there. So we will continue to monitor the interest rates and more recently put a panel of the board together to help us look at whether our best investments can be for how we use those funds and protect those funds. Lastly, deferred revenue, it really just means it's money that has come in before the end of our fiscal year. So you will all know and remember that you have to pay by a certain deadline. And typically it's at the end of June. We extended the deadline this COVID year, this past the 2021 registration cycle. And so it looks a bit higher because in fact, money came in after the sort of typical due date. So the one-time reduced registration fee and the extended date sort of just impacts that deferred revenue, but it's really money that's coming in before year end, but it's going to fund the following year. So your registration fees are for the coming year. So strong financial position. We're always excited when we get the letter from the auditor and the final audited statements that are presented to the board. Certainly we're always happy to see a very clean audit and in their opinion that we have done a good job of managing the affairs of the college with respect to accounting standards that are in place when external independent individuals take a look at how we're managing our finances and the financial position. So they're satisfied and gave us a clean audit, which is always a great thing to see. So thank you for your attention, and I will pass it back to Karen.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kathy, for the audited financial statements. Very much appreciated. We will now move on to the next portion of the AGM, the question and answer session. So I am going to hand this portion of the agenda over to Andrea Bowden to help us facilitate. So Andrea, over to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Karen. I'd really like to start off today by extending my sincere thanks to all of those that emailed in their questions in advance of the session today. After reviewing these questions and theming them, we have 4 questions that we're going to be looking at today. Okay, I'll move us to the first one here. Okay, to get us started, I would like to introduce Mary O'Callaghan, COTBC Public Board Member. Mary is going to answer the question, is there anything new you can tell us about the Ministry of Health's recommendations to reduce the number of colleges where COTBC merges into a multi-profession college? Over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Andrea. Pardon me. Thanks, Andrea. And thank you for this very logical question, given we have known that there are changes on the horizon since at least November 2019, when the Minister of Health's all-party steering committee began consultations on their proposals to modernize the regulation of health professions in BC. The final recommendations were released, as has been said, in August 2020, and these provided a dramatic picture of change for many of the colleges regulating over 21 professions in British Columbia. As the audience well knows, in August 2020, we were amid a worldwide pandemic, and in BC, we were responding along with the rest of the world. Who could predict that we would, almost 20 months later, still be experiencing the impact of the pandemic? Perhaps in this context, the answer to the question is understandable. And the short answer is, to date, we have no news to report from the Ministry of Health on any final approvals or direction for implementation of the August 2020 recommendations. It is a ministry decision to move the recommendations forward, so we are in a wait and see mode. We expect that the proposed changes will likely require amendments to the Health Professions Act, and to this end, COTBC, along with other BC health regulators, have provided feedback on sections in the Health Professions Act in alignment with the principles of transparency, accountability, and public safety. We will watch for those to be introduced in the legislature. In the meantime, we will continue our activities with our partner health regulators and leverage our collective experience and expertise to ready us for the changes ahead. So while we still don't know what will happen or when, it might be helpful to do a quick recap on one of the recommendations that would see COTBC merged into a multi-profession regulator, a College of Allied Health and Care Professions. This change is targeted to address the goal of improving efficiency and effectiveness by reducing the number of regulatory colleges from 20 to 6. So the figure on the slide shows the proposed restructuring of the colleges and where COTBC would be situated. This change would see us become part of a multi-profession regulatory college. And you can see from the slide that there are other amalgamations proposed as well. These changes are intended to better align regulation with team-based care and promote consistency in standards across professions. Larger colleges are viewed as more efficient in terms of access to the resources needed to conduct their activities and to harness the expertise and broader experience that can come with larger entities. You may have heard that the 4 colleges regulating dental care professions, as you can see on the slide, they're proposed as the Oral Health College, have decided to proceed on moving forward with their amalgamation, and their planning is well underway. There is information on their respective websites if you care to have a look at that. So what's next? Implementation of the steering committee recommendations rests with the Cabinet and the Legislative Assembly. We do not yet know the final direction or timing for implementation of these recommendations. COTBC is working with our other multi-profession college partners to explore what we can do to prepare for changes likely to come from the decision to approve the recommendations. Building on our strong foundation of working together will stand us in good stead for the interesting conversations certainly to come. The anticipated reshaping of health profession regulation in BC and the impact of the global pandemic remain our current reality for the foreseeable future. Notwithstanding the uncertainty this context brings, the college continues its work with an unrelenting focus on protecting the public. We are ready for what the future may bring. COTBC is committed to providing registrants with ongoing updates on the evolving health profession regulatory system in BC and, as always, working with our college partners to better serve and protect all British Columbians. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mary. Appreciate the answer. I would now like to introduce Gail Nye, COTBC Public Board Member, who will answer a 2-part question for us on the Provincial Health Officer's orders on COVID-19 vaccination. The first part of the question, will COVID-19 vaccination be required to be registered as an OT in BC? And second, should I choose to go off the register because of my vaccination choices, or if I'm currently off the register and want to return to practice, what will the requirements be? Over to you, Gail.
Thanks, Andrea, and hello, everyone. My thanks to the occupational therapists who have been contacting the college for clarity regarding the provincial health officer's recent vaccination orders. The college fully supports the vaccination efforts of the province for occupational therapists and for the public. The public needs to have confidence that when they receive health care from a health professional, they are not putting their health at risk. We recognize that the vast majority of registrants have taken their responsibility to help eliminate COVID-19 by getting vaccinated and diligently following COVID-19 prevention practices at work. In the current context of the COVID-19 pandemic, BC's provincial health officer provides direction and guidance, such as orders regarding any requirements for vaccination. This is not within the college's current authority to do so. If COVID-19 vaccination was to become required as part of registration processes for regulated health professionals, it would be as directed by the Ministry of Health or by the PHO, which has recently been implied in the media.
Gail, could I interrupt you for just 1 second? I know, could you lower your paper, just move it to the side just a little bit? That would be great. Thank you. We'd love to see you. Thanks.
Sorry for that.
No, don't.
All right. Addressing the second part of the question, should I choose to go off the register because of my vaccination choices, or am currently off the register and want to return to practice, what will the requirements be? For former registrants who still meet the currency hours requirement, the process to re-register is pretty straightforward. Similar to the process at registration renewal, you have to meet all registration requirements, such as having professional liability insurance, completing a criminal record check, signing off on any necessary declarations, and disclosing any relevant regulatory history you may have if you had practiced in another province. As stated before, if COVID-19 vaccination were to become required as part of the registration process, it would be as directed by the Ministry of Health or by the PHO. For former registrants who don't meet the currency hours requirements, which means they do not have 600 hours of OT practice in the past 3 years, returning to practice means you have to complete the college's re-entry program. This typically requires a supervised practicum that confirms your competence to return to practice. The length of this practicum varies depending on how long you've been out of practice. The practicum's plan must be approved by the registration committee, which consists of both occupational therapists and members of the public. The committee confirms that adequate safeguards are in place to mitigate any potential risk to public health and safety. Information regarding the college's registration and re-entry processes is available on the COTBC website. Additionally, the COVID-19 resources section of the site is updated as new information is received. Please be sure to check the website regularly to ensure you have the information most up to date. And as registration and vaccination requirements may change over time. As always, you are also invited to contact the office and someone from the registration team will be pleased to assist you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail, for that answer. I appreciate your presenting that for us today. Okay. I would now like to invite Jennifer Glasgow, elected COTBC board member, to address the following question. Is there a plan to update the occupational therapist regulation so that occupational therapists can perform restricted activities such as acupuncture? Over to you, Jennifer.
Hey everybody, nice to be here, and thanks to the OTs who contacted the college recently with this practice question. So by way of background, COTBC was established back in December 1998 when the Ministry of Health designated occupational therapy as a health profession under the Health Professions Act, which meant that the college was granted in law the authority to regulate occupational therapists in BC. So the college regulates using the Health Professions Act, Occupational Therapist Regulation, and college bylaws. And in fact, all of the 20 regulatory health regulatory colleges in BC regulate in the same way. So this question is really about the second thing in that list, occupational therapist regulation. And a professions regulation is a scope of practice statements to describe in broad, non-exclusive terms what the profession does and how it does it. It also specifies title and any restricted activities that registrants for profession are authorized to do. The occupational therapist regulation in place today does not have any restricted activities authorized since our regulation was established before the restricted activities list was first proposed in 2001 as part of the ministry's new regulatory model. So while there's a practical explanation with the passage of time, it's still a frustrating explanation. So since 2010, the ministry has gradually updated most health professions regulations, allowing those professions to incorporate the 2010 list of proposed restricted activities into their practice. As of today, despite COTBC's repeated requests, the OT regulation remains one of a handful of health profession college regulations that needs updating. Our OT regulation has not been reviewed since it was established in 1998. You might notice if you look at the regulation on your screen, it states 2008. That was due to some broad changes to everyone's regulation, but it didn't change the scope or restricted activity elements in the OT regulation. So how does that apply to acupuncture and dry needling? Well, the model of authorizing restricted activities, it's not unique to BC, and there's OTs that come to BC, for example, from Alberta and Ontario, and they know that in those provinces, there are restricted activities that OTs are authorized to practice. For example, OTs in Ontario might practice psychotherapy, and OTs in Alberta are authorized to do acupuncture. These respective colleges then set the standards, limits, or conditions for the practice of these authorized activities. Decisions to review and update the college's regulation is at the discretion of the government, and to date, there's no timeline for when they intend to review it. The college realizes that this is a challenging position for occupational therapists that are seeking clarity on which restricted activities they can do in BC within their legal scope of practice. As recently as July of this year, college staff met with the Ministry of Health's Professional Regulation and Oversight Branch to reiterate the request to prioritize updates to the OT regulation. So to the specific question of acupuncture, the regulatory framework currently in place does not authorize OTs to incorporate acupuncture into their practice until the government can provide clarity through a regulation update, despite the knowledge that acupuncture is being performed by OTs registered in other provincial jurisdictions like Ontario and Alberta. But that doesn't mean that the college is still preparing. So in preparing for the eventuality that the OT regulation will be updated, the college is building the readiness for when the Ministry of Health initiates its consultation. This work began a few years ago when we traveled throughout the province to meet with registrants as part of the Connect Forum sessions, where we explored what current and potential full scope OT practice is, with particular reference to restricted activities. This preparatory work has helped us to be ready to move swiftly to participate in the ministry's consultations to update our professional regulation. If you have questions about when this OT regulation might be updated, we suggest that you direct those queries to the Ministry of Health's Professional Regulation and Oversight Branch. That's where we direct them to, and I don't think there's anything wrong with the individual registrants contacting them as well. You can find their contact information on the web by searching Professional Regulation BC. Thanks for the opportunity to answer that.
Thanks very much for that answer, Jennifer. Okay. I would now like to introduce Heather Barrett, COTBC's Quality Assurance Program Manager and valued member of the Practice Advisory Team. Heather will be answering our final question for today. Can the college elaborate on the changes to the Quality Assurance Program that were described in the current annual report? So over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Andrea, and absolutely, I'd be happy to answer this one. This past June, the college's Quality Assurance Committee received board approval in principle to revise the assessment component of our current Quality Assurance Program framework, which you can see there on your screen. The changes are the result of a thorough review process that included consideration of feedback and evaluation from the continuing competence exam, which was held in 2016. Ultimately, the Quality Assurance Committee felt that the changes maintain the strengths of our current program and introduce a more pragmatic and realistic process for screening and evaluating registrant competence. So what this means is that we would be moving from an exam every 6 years to a 2-step screening and evaluation process every 3 years. And while full details aren't yet available because the build out of the program is currently in progress, what I can share is that the proposed process of screening competence is likely to include a scoreable practice quiz that is similar to the current annual continuing competence review format, which is otherwise known as the ACCR, as well as a questionnaire based on identifying risks to competence and public safety. The proposed process of evaluating competence includes and involves a scoreable structured interview, which would be relevant to the registrant's area of practice. So while all practicing occupational therapists in BC would be required to participate in the activities related to screening competence, only those identified by the screening activities will be required to participate in an evaluation interview. The Quality Assurance Committee is working towards implementing this new framework for the 2023 or 2024 registration cycles, and we fully commit to continue to communicate and engage with registrants more as we move forward with these changes and can share more details of the program as they become available.
Great, thanks so much, Heather. Really appreciate that, that elaboration. So that concludes the question and answer portion of the agenda today. A reminder, if you still have questions, please do put them in the Q&A box, and someone will be pleased to follow up with you after the meeting. And also a big thanks again to those folks that submitted questions in advance of the AGM. I'll now hand the session back to Karen, who will lead us through the remaining portions of the agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andrea, that was great. And Heather for helping to answer the questions that came in advance of the AGM, very helpful. And thank you to those of you who did take time to submit your questions. I would now like to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is just to leave you with a few announcements. Okay, first announcement, which I have to say is probably just personally my favorite announcement, is about the COTBC elections to the board. So we have terms of office of 3 elected occupational therapists board members expiring on July 31st of 2022. So all the OTs in the crowd can anticipate getting an email early next week with instructions to complete your electronic vote. So please keep your eyes open for the emails and the website updates, which will outline important deadlines. And I have to say, this is probably my favorite announcement just because it has been such a valuable learning experience for me, not only as an OT registrant, but learning around the board activities, college activities, and it's been an invaluable learning experience. So I really do have to encourage anyone who is interested in being a member of the board or other committees to put your hand up and participate. As you can hear, it's a very exciting time to be part of regulation. A little bit unknown for sure with what we're going through, but I think that also comes with this excitement and anticipating change. So please participate in the e-voting, and opens the week of November 8th. Our second announcement is that we're pleased to invite you to participate in a quality practice webinar on November 16th from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock p.m. presented by staff from the Provincial Health Services Authority's Office of Virtual Health. Shayla Jaiwas, Senior Practice Leader at the Office of Virtual Health, will introduce the concept of practice in the context of virtual health, highlighting specific PHSA considerations and resources and general awareness. So a great webinar and very relevant to virtual health and what we have been living in the last several months and will continue to do so. So you can register by clicking on the link that's found on the slider on our COTBC homepage. So hope to see you there and join the webinar. Okay, and our last announcement, historically Connect forums were held in November, hosted in partnership with CAOTBC, UBC's Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy, and the college. Last year, we held this session virtually. This year, given the ongoing uncertainties with the pandemic, the Connect Forum is being postponed until the new year in hopes that we will be able to safely meet in person. So stay tuned as we progress through the annual Connect Day and future plannings. With that, we're coming to the close of the meeting, and I hope that this meeting has provided you with a helpful overview of key college activities in the 2020-2021 fiscal year. I thank you for attending and thank you for attending, and I hope that I will have the privilege of seeing you in person in a future AGM and at a future time. I ask that you all consider staying connected with the college. Keep communicating your questions and identifying your concerns and your ideas. You can do this by contacting the office by one of the means on your screen. This is so important during these times while we're adjusting to our changing context. A special thank you to staff and the technical team for all their assistance in hosting this meeting and allowing everything to go seamlessly. Thank you so much. We will endeavor to post a recording of this session on our website in the upcoming week. And with that said, I declare the 2021 COTBC AGM meeting adjourned. And thank you so much for your participation and joining us today. Thank you. Thank you for attending, and thank you to the fellow participants.